Hello, my name is Darby, and welcome to my presentation on self-assessments. Self-assessments provide students the opportunity to assess their own strengths and areas for improvement, create goals to better their learning, provide evidence for their learning. Note, this also helps facilitators see students learning from their perspective, and overall, this creates a more student-centered approach for each learner's education. Here are 5 steps we'll be following to implementing self-assessment. They are defining criteria, applying criteria, the self-assessment, feedback, and creating goals. We're going to start with defining success criteria. Here's a quote from the Ministry of Education that creates a clearer picture on what success criteria is. It is standards or specific descriptions of successful attainment of learning goals developed by teachers on the basis of criteria in the achievement chart and discussed and agreed upon in collaboration with students that are used to determine what degree a learning goal has been achieved. Criteria describes what success looks like and allows the teacher and student to gather information about the quality of student learning. This better depicts the expected learning outcomes for students. In 2014, a case study was conducted with post-secondary students from various majors to determine how self-assessment impacted overall learning. They discovered students had a better understanding of expectations and were more involved with their learning when participated in self-assessments. To determine this criteria with students, educators are encouraged to begin with brainstorming, then organizing various components of the criteria, followed by clearly stating the agreed upon criteria so all students have a good understanding, and then finally making the final touches. This step may need to be repeated many times as it takes a long time to create strong, successful criteria. Now we will move on to applying the criteria. Simply put, this is where the beginning stages of learning happens. It starts with the educator modeling the criteria and finishes with students applying it independently. Next is where learners reflect and do the self-assessment. When providing students with a way to self-assess, it is first the facilitator's responsibility to ensure this is done in a meaningful way, not just a way to make up part of a student's mark. Here is an assessment created by Algonquin College that allows facilitators to assess their own self-assessment methods prior to introducing them to students. You may pause the video to read the questions more specifically. Here are many ways a facilitator may have students self-assess. This list is not limited, as there are many more possibilities. Remember that every subject matter and assignment has self-assessment ways that will work and some that won't. If you're struggling, refer to Algonquin College's document to ensure that it is meaningful for your students. It is also important to document self-assessments so students can refer back to them at the end of the year or term and see their improvements. This list shows some of the many ways you can accomplish this. You may pause the video to read them all. Self-assessments are a great way for students to justify their learning to their facilitator. They know better than anyone how much they have learned. If you're going to grade or evaluate self-assessments, remember we want students focusing on the true purpose of improvement as an intrinsic motivator. If the self-assessment is focused around giving themselves a grade too much, they will be more likely to become extrinsically motivated and assess themselves higher for the grade. When done correctly, a research study with pharmacy students in 2019 compared various forms of grading and found there was minimal differences between self, peer, and final grades from the facilitator. After the student has done a self-assessment, the facilitator will then provide some feedback. Feedback needs to be focused on what is done well so the students know what to do and continue. Then also they need to focus on what needs improvements. If you're ever unsure, follow the Oreo cookie method. The cookie is the positive comments, and the cream in the middle is the constructive comments. The idea is to surround the constructive ones with positive comments to make it a better experience for the students. Remember for constructive comments to focus in on the next step so students do not feel lost. It is important to give examples to help guide students if they need it. You also need to focus on the quality of the feedback. You need to make sure it's linked to the success criteria defined earlier. You want to prioritize what's the most important aspect. Don't focus on the minutia. You want to see the big picture. You want to identify progress on previously set goals. This way, students can see their improvement and it's recognized and can be a positive experience. Use lots of examples and make sure the tone of the feedback is overall positive, constructive, and helpful. We don't want students getting discouraged. Next, we will create an action plan. This is to generate an individual learning goals. You want it to be specific. You want students to record these goals, and then you want them to monitor their progress so they can see how much they are achieving them. The facilitator can model writing goals, guide the students, give feedback on goals, help record them, record actions towards achieving them, follow up with progress, and encourage them through the whole year or term. We want to make sure they are also following the SMART plan, which is specific and significant. They are measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. Here are my sources, and happy self-assessing. Thank you and have a great day.